It's time to start your morning by taking 5. Here's your host, Matt McMaster.
You're listening to Take 5, a quick 5-minute take on the biggest stories happening in Nebraska sports. I'm your host, Matt McMaster. A big stretch indeed is coming up for the Creighton Blue Jays as they play their final 5 games of the year, starting on Sunday when they take on the Georgetown Hoyas at 3 o'clock at the CHI Health Center. Creighton is coming off back-to-back losses from 2 of the top teams in the Big East in UConn and St. John's. It ended their 3-game kind of like murder's row stretch where they played Marquette, then UConn, then St. John's in about a week's time, a little bit more than that. They ended up going 1-2. I think that's what you probably could have expected from that stretch. Slightly disappointing they weren't able to pull out one of those 2 losses against UConn or St. John's, considering the fact that in all 3 games they were very much in it. Really competitive basketball in the Big East and really fun to see and watch. But Creighton now begins a all-important 5-game stretch where I think when you look at the teams that they're playing, it's very easy to overlook. They're taking on Butler, Seton Hall, DePaul, Xavier, and then Georgetown starting on Sunday. But I think that this is one of the most important stretches of the season for Creighton, if I'm being honest here, just because, number one, like they're locked in to the tournament at this point. It's highly, highly unlikely that they are going to lose. I mean, they would have to lose, I think, almost every single one of these games for it to even be a discussion of them getting out of the NCAA tournament. And that also has to factor in because the bubble this year is historically weak. There really just aren't that many teams who are still vying or have that resume to get into the play or get into the tournament at the last second. And so, factoring in that and factoring in the fact that Coach Greg McDermott's teams typically don't lay eggs against lesser opponents, I think that you're pretty confident that this team, is going to go 4-1, probably should go 5-0 during the stretch. We'll see what the line is against Xavier. It's going to be pretty close because that game's on the road, but I anticipate them being favorites in almost every single game that they'll play down the stretch. But this stretch is so important because the NCAA tournament sometimes just comes down to who's clicking going into it, who is playing the best basketball. And when you're playing 5 teams who aren't necessarily at the top of your conference, it gives you a really good opportunity to gain that confidence, to start firing at all cylinders, to start clicking and gaining that ability that you need, gaining that kind of mental structure you need in order to make deep runs into the NCAA tournament. And this is a team that, when they're playing at their best, which is Ryan Kalkbrenner and Stephen Ashworth are playing like one of the best duos in the country, and they're getting contributions from key players like Jackson McAndrew, Jason Green, Fedor Zugic, and Isaac Trout. It's a team that can make the Sweet 16. I mean, they have the ceiling to do that. When they're getting major contributions off the bench and their stars are playing like stars, this team, and we've seen it already throughout the season, can compete and beat any team in the country. And so the fact that it's easy to overlook these 5 games, it's easy to say, well, they're playing the bottom of the barrel in the Big East. It's not that big of a deal. No, I mean, it's good that they get to kind of have a tune-up before they get into the all-important Big East tournament and NCAA tournament. And, I think that as well, what you have to factor in here, too, is, Ryan Kalkbrenner is going – he got hurt at the end of the game against St. John's, and they've confirmed that he's avoided a major injury at this point. There's anticipated soreness that he'll have with his right foot, and I think it is important that when you play these teams, hopefully you won't need to play Ryan Kalkbrenner 40, 35, 30 minutes a game in order to win them, so you can give him a little bit of a proper rest heading into these tournaments in the postseason. And he is one of the greatest Creighton basketball players of all time. And it would just be really, really disappointing if this team doesn't make a run in the NCAA tournament, doesn't make it to the Sweet 16 with him in his final season, because he is so accomplished and so important and the catalyst of this team, and they have the pieces to put together a nice run. And this 5-game stretch is going to give them all the opportunity in the world to gain all the confidence they need to make that deep run. And also another factor that you have to put into this. Being an 8 seed is so much different than being a 7 seed, okay? There's a bit of a gap this year between the 1 seeds and the 2 seeds, and you definitely want to be sitting on that 7 to 10 line as opposed to sitting on that 8 to 9 line. They end up winning these 5 games. They'll comfortably be a 6 seed to maybe, a 7 seed, maybe a 6 seed. If they drop a couple, you're going to be in that 8-9 line, and I don't know. These 4 1 seeds that we're going to get, whether it be a combination of Auburn, Alabama, Florida, Duke, or Houston, are all just absolute tanks. You do not want to play those teams in the second round, and you're hoping that you avoid that 5th team that I just mentioned, whatever the 5th team may be, if you are a 7 seed. So winning these 5 games, solidifying yourself as a 7, maybe even getting yourself up to a 6, and building some momentum heading to the postseason, super, super important. It'll be important on Sunday when they take a team who the last time they played them, they lost by 24. You've been listening to Take 5. I've been your host, Matt McMaster.